Islamic sciences. So without further ado, inshallah, Sayyid, whenever you're ready.
Okay, thank you, sister, for the kind introduction. Really appreciate it. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and get started. As the sister mentioned, I'm a Hausa student, and I had the honor of speaking to you all. It's a real pleasure to speak to the youth. I'm really amazed that you guys are awake and doing ibadat on this important night. And the idea here was to kind of give people a little bit of a break from the formal ibadat, and everyone wants to talk a little bit during Laylatul Qadr as well. So why not make it something productive and useful and something that thought-provoking that can actually help us as well instead of just chit-chat. So think of this hour as maybe just a refreshment, a recharge. It's not going to be super dense, hopefully it's interesting, but it's not going to be super dense material. I do want to make it interactive. So to the extent that you all can participate, I think it'll be more interesting and fruitful during the hour as well. So I'd really like to encourage participation. Whenever I ask questions, Sister Hidayah can also help with the asking of questions and prodding you all as well. Just before we begin, I kind of want to get a sense, because this is a virtual setting, so it's hard to know. I haven't met any of you, so it's hard to know exactly how who I'm speaking to. So if it's possible, if people can just whoever's comfortable with it can just tell me your name, your age. And then, are you in high school, college? That'll kind of give me a better sense of the crowd that we're speaking to today. So is there anyone that can jump in there? Looks like we have quite a few people.
I can go.
Assalamu alaikum.
Salam.
How are you guys?
Nahdi, how are you?
Alhamdulillah. We're supposed to be, this is a Suhoor Chat, right? So we're supposed to be eating, correct? Hope you guys don't mind.
Yeah.
We'll be eating.
Yeah, you can eat. Don't worry.
Alhamdulillah.
We're not that formal. So anyone want to jump in? Just let me know your age. Are you in high school, college? Where do you go to school?
Sorry, I'll jump in. You already know me, but my name's Hussein. Assalamu alaikum. I am a junior, and I will be attending University of Maryland in the fall. I'm 21.
Thanks, Hussein.
You're welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Faisal. I am a college student. I am 22 years of age.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for that.
Salam, I'm Musa. I'm 15 and I'm in high school.
Thank you, Musa. Walaikum salam.
I'm Muhammad Ibrahim. I'm 10 and I go.
The audio cut off there.
To elementary school, and I'm in 4th grade.
Oh, mashallah.
Inshallah. Anyone else?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name is Amin. I attend the University of Maryland. I am a rising junior, inshallah, and I'm 20 years old. Thank you for the opportunity.
Jazakumullah khair. Walaikum salam, brother. Thank you for coming.
Salam, my name is Saliha. Despite what my name on this thing says, I am 17. I'm soon will be a freshman in college.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay, so I think that kind of helps me. We have quite a few people here, so I think it doesn't make sense to go through everyone. It just gives me a sense of the age range we have here. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen. Let's see if I can do this.
Can I suggest to start with the prayer for our Imam before we start?
Of course.
As a suggestion.
Yeah, of course. We can go ahead and start with Dua Faraj, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Actually, would you like to lead, brother, if you like? Or
Me? Okay.
yeah, would you like to lead, inshallah? Okay.
I mean, I can recite. Also,
Sure.
10-year-old times 3 point something.
Okay.
And I'm not a college student.
Okay.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين اللهم كل وليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه. Jazakallah khair, brother. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Is my screen visible now to you all?
Yeah, we can see it. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. All right. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So the topic of our presentation is maintaining our Islamic identity, the high school and college years. So why are we here, right? Excuse me, I'm just... Okay. So why are we here? So high school and college years are generally considered the fun years or the best years of your life, right? According to modern culture, right? That's what people think of. I remember when I was in college, one of the common sayings was that, your work never ends, but college does. So try to enjoy it while you can, right? So that's kind of the attitude, is that this is the peak of your life and this time is never going to come back. And so live it up, enjoy it. Because this is kind of the peak and it's all kind of downhill from here, right? And what happens and what we've seen, unfortunately, is that a lot of people lose their identity and or their faith during these years. So many people, and I've seen this, and I'm sure many of you, inshallah, this doesn't affect anyone in this group because, you're all here on Laylatul Qadr, mashallah, and you're willing to participate in this at 1 a.m. your time. But there's many people who lose their identity or lose their faith during their college years. So I had people I knew who stopped practicing Islam or became less practicing for various reasons during their high school and college years. And we're going to talk about some of the reasons that happens. So what we want to talk about today is how is it that we can protect our identity, preserve it, and strengthen it during these years, right? What are the changes that we see that happen during this time? And then what are some strategies for combating that based on, with the teachings that we have in the Quran and from the Ahlul Bayt, right? So when we think of identity, we can think of two different ways to conceive of our Muslim identity, right? And these are called the melting pot and the salad bowl. So the melting pot is the idea, which you've probably heard of, which is that everyone, all immigrants, for example, come to America and under the sort of banner and slogan of equal rights, they all kind of, their identities become assimilated into one sort of new American identity. And just like a boiling soup in which you're adding ingredients, eventually those ingredients kind of meld into one and they become part of the soup, right? So that melting pot is a similar idea where we're all losing our identities slowly and becoming something different, right? Another way to think of identity, which inshallah is what we want to strive for and what is the correct way, is as a salad bowl, right? Where in a salad, you have different pieces coming together, but they each complement each other, but none of them loses its own distinct identity, right? And so that's what we want to strive for as Muslims. We want to be confident in who we are, strong in who we are, but also part of a larger whole and contributing to that larger whole, having an effect on that larger whole without losing our individual identity as mu'mineen, as Muslims, as Shia, right? So what is our, let's to start talking about identity, just as a question, what do you think our identity is at the moment, right? So what do you think of when you think of Islam? What do you think of when you think of Muslims? Or what do other people think of when thinking of Islam and Muslims? So I'm just putting this question out for anyone to answer. Just feel free to jump in if you have a response here. And again, this is meant to be interactive, so don't feel shy in responding.
I think what other people think of Muslims and Islam is like a restrictive sort of concept, because they see women wearing hijab and they're like, oh, they're forced to wear it. It's restricting their, I don't know, their beauty or whatever, something like that.
Okay, so restriction is one idea associated with Islam.
Close-mindedness. People think that, well, you know, people can be whoever they want to be, however they feel is what they want to feel, and that's how they can be like that. But Islam says that you can't. You have to. You're born as who you are.
Okay, so people associate Islam with closed-mindedness. Okay, anyone else?
I think people often think of it as something unique to Middle Eastern and or Southeast Asian culture only.
So it's associated with Southeast Asian, South Asian and Middle Eastern culture. Okay. Yeah, I think you guys are on the right track, right? So some of the common themes that we see, you know, when people think about Islam, unfortunately, or even sometimes when we think about Islam, are, you know, the ideas of terrorism and war, hijab, and someone mentioned, you know, other restrictions related to women, just strictness in general. People think of Islam as a very strict religion. You know, they might know that, for example, Muslims don't drink or eat pork. So those are pretty commonly known things, right? Unfortunately, these are tied up with our identity now, right? And these are ideas that other people have imposed on us, and how other people sometimes identify us, and maybe how even we identify ourselves, right? But as an alternative, what is it that we wish other people thought of when thinking of Islam and Muslims? Any thoughts here?
Success, people who are trustworthy, who are honest, get things done.
Okay.
You know,
people who are trustworthy and honest, people who get things done. Okay. Anything else?
piety, trustworthiness.
Okay.
We're a religion.
Like a religion of freedom.
Religion of freedom. I think there was someone else speaking as well.
Yeah, Islam is like a religion of peace rather than terrorism.
Islam is a religion of peace rather than terrorism. Yeah, right, exactly. So if we had the opportunity, we would say that our identity is those things, right? Some other ideas include, for example, that we're well-mannered people, right? That we have good akhlaq, that we have piety, we're pious, we're humble, we're sincere, that, you know, we're a scholarly community that's well-educated, well-studied, well-researched, that we are just and fair people, and that we're people who are working towards just causes, working towards building a more just society, that we're service-oriented, that we like to be generous and give to people who are more needy than us, that might need more than us, for example, right? So this is ideally what our identity should be, because these are things that Islam teaches and embodies, right? Unfortunately, it's not that right now, right? Why is it important to preserve our identity? You know, identity is something that allows us to carve out a space for us to practice and maintain our faith, right? So when we are strong in our identity, when we're proud of who we are, when we you know, don't have anxiety about being Muslim, you know, for example, when we can walk into that high school classroom or that college classroom and just feel comfortable, for example, wearing hijab, feel comfortable asking for, you know, time to pray if we need it, feel comfortable telling people that we're fasting in Ramadan, feel comfortable having a beard, right? When we're proud of our identity, then that makes a certain space for us to practice our faith more easily in that same environment, right? It also allows us to be known in society in a distinct way, right? So, and that has its own benefits. So what I mean by this is that when you're strong in your own identity and when you've maintained your own identity in a certain way, you're known, right? You're a known person, right? Just like in any relationship, if you have an identity, people associate you and respect you based on that identity that you have, right? So similarly, as Muslims, if we don't try to own our identity, if we don't create an identity, that's only to our own detriment. Whereas if we have an identity and we're proud of it and we own it and we live up to it, then people recognize that in us and they give us that respect because they recognize that identity is something valuable. And it carves, like we said, it carves out a certain space. It allows us to practice our faith more easily. And it has other less tangible benefits. For example, now as Muslims are more and more commonly, existing in the workforce, you see that a lot of employers, for example, now know what Ramadan is. They now know what Eid is, right? 20 years ago, you had very few people who had heard of these things, or at least many fewer than today, right? And that's partially because Muslims are actively telling people that about Ramadan, about Eid, right? For example, I was in Target the other day and I was surprised to see they had Eid al-Fitr cards, right? Selling Eid cards at Target, right? So just 5-10 years ago, you couldn't imagine that. Now, not to say that that's a victory or anything. That's like what our goal should be. It's like, okay, great, Target is selling cards. But beyond that, it's the idea is there, right? The idea is that we're more present in the public space and we're kind of asserting what we believe in and who we are and trying to maintain that identity and show that identity, and other people will give respect based on that, and then that allows the rest of us to practice more comfortably, right? To not be afraid and live in this environment of fear, right? I just want to add that identity and faith, I am kind of using them in a related way, but they're not exactly the same thing, right? So identity is faith. I think we all understand that iman that we have in the doctrines of Islam, God, the Prophet, the Day of Judgment, the Ahlul Bayt, etc. Identity is what we, what title we ascribe to, or what faith group we ourselves ascribe to. So, for example, someone may not have very strong iman, right? May not be very practicing, may not, be very strong in their faith, but they still might identify as Muslim, right? So they're overlapping concepts, but they're not exactly the same thing. And we're going to be talking a little bit about both, but this is a little bit more focused on preserving and maintaining our Islamic heritage and our Islamic identity during these years, right? Because as I said, if that identity is strong, that also helps us practice our faith, right? And vice versa, right? So what are some obstacles to maintaining our identity during these years, right? And again, I want to put this out there because it seems like we have a wide range of people from different high school and college backgrounds. What aspects of Islam, and I'm asking genuinely curiously, right? Because I've been through this age and I had my own struggles and I can talk about them. I've had friends who've had their challenges, but I want to ask you all, what are the aspects of Islam that you find to be difficult to practice at this age, right? Like what, is it a belief? Is it a certain practice? And if so, what is that practice or what is that belief? And again, anyone can jump in here.
I'll go first to break the ice. Personally, I think the hardest part for me was just like relationships. Like I feel like even starting like at middle school, I just remember like people dating. I didn't even go to public middle school, subhanAllah, but you just like, it's just see like, you be like watching Nickelodeon and it's like, wow, they're dating. So everyone's dating, and in Islam, it's like, well, you want to get married, but then it's like, that's a whole different story. It's like, not even all Muslims in the community support that. So it's like, okay, what am I left with?
Yeah. Okay. So kind of dealing with other people and their like free gender interactions and dating, realizing that you're more restricted, and then that psychologically kind of puts some pressure on you almost, right? That's what you're saying? Okay. Anyone else?
I'll go. One thing that's, by the way, my name's Ahmed, but one thing that is difficult for me right now is shaking hands with the opposite gender. It's really, really super awkward, just trying to break things down as to why I can't shake that person's hand.
Yeah, so that's a lifelong challenge. I'll just tell you that right now. I mean, the earlier you start kind of thinking about the ways to practice and your script and how you deal with that, the better. So we can talk about that. Sister Hidayah, are you saying something? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, I was just saying I don't think it'll be much of a problem anymore.
Yeah.
I think Dr. Fauci gave us a lifeline, so I think we're good.
Yeah, inshallah, we can. The one silver lining of the coronavirus is, I think we're all good with saying that we don't want to shake hands for hygienic reasons. So,
yes.
But beyond that, yeah, it's a real challenge. So thank you for bringing that up. So I'll keep moving in the interest of time because there's a lot to cover in this presentation, and I think we do want to leave some time. I only have an hour. I don't want to take too much of your time because ibadat and those things and speaking to God and asking for forgiveness are the most important thing. This is just a refresher for you guys, right? So actually, you know what? Let me take one more response. Is there anyone else that wants to contribute here in terms of obstacles? So we had, gender interactions, not being able to engage in that or just being different in that regard, and then handshaking. Is there anything else?
One thing for me is prayer is really difficult to motivate myself to do, especially when I'm out in school and out all day, and then coming home, all you do is want to sleep. So prayer is a big thing for me.
Okay, so because of your fatigue, is that what you're saying?
Not just motivation to do it.
Motivation
in general.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so the motivation to keep up your 5 daily prayers. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. So I want to go ahead to, I'm sure we could spend a lot of time hearing some feedback, and we'll leave some time in the discussion to open this up a little bit more. But just to make sure we get through this, what are some strategies for keeping our identity as Muslims strong during this period, right? One thing that helps is, realizing that fiqh can help us here, right? Fiqh is, as many of you know, but just in case anyone's not super familiar with the term, it's the sort of code of legal practice that we have, right? All the rules and regulations, the do's and don'ts. We think of fiqh as basically the red lines of Islam, the boundaries, right? And actually, if you go into it, it's not really that. That's kind of a simplification of the idea of what fiqh is. But for argument's sake, we can say fiqh is the red lines, right? Fiqh is the boundaries. And what fiqh does is that it serves a communal purpose, right? And that communal purpose is that it allows us, that's to form a common baseline for a unified communal spiritual practice, right? So if you think about it, if we didn't have fiqh, we wouldn't be praying the same way, even if we had the same belief system, we wouldn't be praying the same way, right? We wouldn't be, fiqh is what allows us to fast at the same time every year, right? With the same start and end times. It's what allows, Muslim women and Muslim men to observe a similar dress code, right? And a similar code of conduct in terms of how they carry themselves in public and, how they cover. It's what allows us to make pilgrimage in the same way, right? And it's because we have this very detailed, very, a very precise set of laws and regulations that guides us in different aspects of our life, right? And you can think of that as restrictive, right? And maybe it is in some ways, right? Because it does restrict our behavior from doing certain things, right? But on the other hand, it is also something that unites us, right? It gives us a common direction, right? And it helps us ground our spiritual practice. So what I mean by that is that many people, for example, who are spiritual but not religious, right? Let's say that's like a popular thing that people have, right? It's like, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious. I'm spiritual, but I don't do anything specific, right? So these people, and this is a point that Sayyid Sulaiman has made a lot, so I'll give him the credit for this point, is that, many people who think like this, for example, they might believe in being modest, right? But if you don't have fiqh, how is that modesty embodied and how is it practiced, right? How do you understand modesty versus how does somebody else who's also spiritual but not religious understand modesty, right? What's okay? Do you need to, are, for example, tank tops, are those modest or are those not modest? What about, tight clothing, right? How tight is too tight, right? What about short shorts, right? How short is too short, right? So these are all areas where you could start having reasonable disagreement about what modesty is. And fiqh comes in and sets those lines for us, right? So it kind of gives us a grounding and a basis from which we can then get closer to God, right? Through that, right? Once we have that grounding in place, and once we're all sort of united in observing those boundaries, it creates a communal identity. But it also allows us to ground our spiritual practice such that we can get closer to God once we've fulfilled these basic requirements. And we know, for example, when I say fiqh is coming from the Quran, the Hadith, and what our aql says, right? So once we take these sources and we put them into fiqh, we know, for example, what the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt have said about how modest we need to be, right? And that is our standard, right? So it's not just me thinking that I'm spiritual and I have my own standard of modesty, whereas you say you're spiritual and you think modesty is something else. Well, no, actually, we have the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt who tell us how modest is good enough, right? What is modesty and what needs to be covered, what doesn't need to be covered, right? So that's kind of what fiqh allows us to do, right? And of course, when it comes to self-development and getting closer to God, the red lines of fiqh are not our goal, right? We don't say that as Muslims, we strive to just do the bare minimum, stay within the red lines, right? But they're a starting point. Of course, as people who are on the path of self-development and serving God and getting closer to God, we want to go further, right? We want to go beyond the basics, okay? All right, another obstacle is doubts and uncertainty. So high school and college years are a time when people often encounter serious doubts about their faith for the first time, right? Very common, extremely common, to have doubt, to have faith. You're meeting people with different belief systems. You're kind of at a point of, you've matured quite a bit in your thought process. You can critically analyze things. You might be questioning things you grew up with for the first time, et cetera, et cetera. So very briefly, are doubts encouraged or discouraged in Islam? Thoughts?
I would say encouraged, highly encouraged.
Encouraged. Okay.
I would say encouraged because if those doubts are clarified, then it can strengthen your religion, your belief.
Very good. Yeah. Yeah. So doubt has a negative connotation, right? But the word doubt, but if you think about it, what is a doubt other than just having a sincere question, right? Don't use the word doubt, just say, I have a question about something, right? And here we can, but to go along with it, we'll stick with the terminology and say doubts, right? So I want to draw a distinction here between constructive doubts and destructive doubts, right? So there's different types of doubts, and we need to be careful to make sure we're on the left side of this column, to make sure we have constructive doubts. Constructive doubts are those where the person is sincere. They respect, the authority and the tradition. They're asking out of humility, and they're certain of the core of their beliefs, but they want to strengthen their understanding, right? They don't take everything. They don't doubt everything, right? They have certain things they believe in, and there's certain things that they want to explore further, right? Destructive doubts are sometimes those that arise out of rebelliousness and cynicism, right? They don't have any respect for authority or tradition. Oftentimes the person is trying to make a point by asking a question. He's trying to put someone down or make them look stupid, right? They're sarcastic, witty, etc. And sometimes this person can even question the most basic of things, right? Like, prove to me that I exist, right? And so he'll say that he'll start to question whether he even exists and what is the proof of his existence, right? So those are destructive doubts, which you want to avoid. We want to make sure our doubts are constructive doubts, right? For example, I don't fully understand hijab. It seems kind of unfair because men are not required to cover as much as women. I need to make some time this summer to read more about the philosophy of hijab, excuse the typo, and talk to a scholar. In the meantime, I will continue to observe hijab because I know it is part of Islam. Right? So this person is sincere. They don't understand. They have a real question. They think it's unfair. They say they're going to make some time and consult a scholar and do their own reading, but they'll continue to observe it. They're kind of putting a place mark, right, in their mind and saying, all right, one thing doesn't make sense, but I'm still going to work on it until I can figure it out. All right, a destructive way to think of the same issue. Hijab is just another way in which men control women's bodies. I can't believe so many people blindly follow it. I reject it until someone can prove to me that it's completely fair and that it's really part of Islam, right? So see the difference in how these people are approaching, right, the same issue, right? One person is coming at it with an inquisitive mind, some sincerity, some humility, and saying, I don't understand this. And it doesn't seem 100% to me, but I think I need to research this and try to understand it a little bit better, right? So doubts, questions, and uncertainty are all part of the process of growing in Iman, right? The important thing here is that we need to be humble, sincere, and try to seek resolution from trustworthy and knowledgeable sources, right? It's okay to have doubts, right? It's okay to, oftentimes, a doubt is a prerequisite to a stronger belief, right? There's a famous hadith that says that knowledge is a lock whose key is the question, right? So when we have a question, when we ask questions, that's how we get to knowledge, right? Oftentimes you can't get to it without having those sincere questions that ground you sometimes, right? And that take you back, right? So don't be scared of doubts, but don't engage in all or nothing thinking, right? And that means that sometimes, one little part of Islam doesn't make sense to us. And so we say, all right, well, this Islam thing can't be for me, right? This can't be right because, this doctrine doesn't make any sense to me. No, that's not how it is, right? Like I said, when one thing doesn't make sense, you put a placeholder on that. You say, all right, these other things make sense to me. This one thing doesn't, and I'm going to spend some time when I have more time to research this and study this and try to find answers to this question. But I'm not going to throw out the whole system because this one thing isn't clicking in my mind right now, right? And we have this verse that I want to share. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. وَالَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلَنَا وَإِنَّ اللَّهَ لَمَعَ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. That when we're sincere, right? The translation is that as for those who strive hard, right? Jahadu, in our cause, we will surely guide them to our paths. And Allah is surely with those who do good, right? So what this verse is saying is that if you are sincere, right? If you're striving and you're striving to get a better understanding, you're striving to serve God in any way, but one way is to get a better understanding of God and of his system and of what the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt taught, then of course that guidance is going to come, right? In one form or another, it's going to come, right? That's what this verse is saying, right? That if you strive and if you're sincere, then God is going to guide you to answer that doubt of yours, inshallah, in the best way possible, right? Another obstacle is sin, right? So high school and college are a time when people have newfound freedom, right? And for many people, this means that it's much easier to fall into sinful behavior and conduct that's inappropriate for Muslims, right? One of the brothers alluded to that as in gender mixing and dating and those kinds of things are obviously extremely common. So as Muslims, it's very tempting to, try to get close to the line and say, all right, well, I'm going to do something similar here. And, maybe I'm not going to cross the line. Maybe I'll come close to it. These kinds of ideas come into our mind, right? And this is a big problem because we're surrounded by people who, in our view, are doing things that are not right, right? Are not things that God wants us to do, right? Are not living the way that the Prophet wants us to live, right? And so how do we combat that? And one idea is to strengthen wilaya, right? Wilaya comes from the Arabic root waw lam ya, and it has lots of meanings like closeness, guardianship, friendship, protection, support, and love, right? And in general, in Islam, what we mean by wilaya, and you've probably heard this term in different concepts, what generally it means is that it's a deep sense of love, loyalty, authority, and sacrificing for another person, right? So we have this verse of Quran, which, I'll just read the translation in the interest of time. Whoever has wilaya with God and his Prophet and those who believe the party of God, it is they who will be victorious, right? From Imam Baqir alayhi salam, that Islam is built upon 5 things: Salat, Zakat, Som, Hajj, and Wilaya. But none of them were proclaimed with such importance by Allah the way Wilaya was proclaimed. Wilaya is the key to all the rest. Right? So again, I'm sorry if I'm going a bit fast. I want to slow down just a bit here. That we've heard this term probably in Majalis and Jummah, right? The Wilaya of Ahlul Bayt, right? And what that means is, as I said, it can mean the guardianship of the Ahlul Bayt, right? meaning that they are our guardians and we look to them for guidance and leadership and support, right? They're the people who are teaching us deen, right? But when we have that wilayah towards them, we also love them, right? We also follow them. We also support them. We have a sense of sacrifice towards them, right? So this concept is very deep, and it has multiple different types of meanings, right? When we say Aliyun Waliullah, right? For example, Ali is the wali of God, right? Now that doesn't mean that, does that mean Ali is the guardian of God? No, right? That means that Ali is, for example, the friend, right, of God, and he's close to God, right? So it has those ideas of friendship, love, care, support, loyalty, all built into it, right? So based on wilayah, God wants us to have a sense of loyalty, devotion, attachment, and love towards who, right? Towards God himself, right? Towards the prophets and the Ahlul Bayt, and towards other mu'mineen, right? This wilayah is all encompassing, and it's vertical towards God and the Ahlul Bayt and the prophets, but it's also horizontal, right? It's also towards other mu'mineen, right? The sense of loyalty and love, right? And this, what I'm going to argue is that this is one way that we can kind of deal with the temptations of sin, is to strengthen our wilayah and our love for God, the Prophet, the Ahlul Bayt, and other mu'mineen, right? Because why, right? When we strengthen our love, right? Love is transformative, right? When we love, for example, there's one type of relationship we have with God and the Ahlul Bayt where we are doing things because, for example, we read it in a risala and the fiqh says that, all right, you have to do X, Y, Z. All right, so we're doing it. Our parents told us, you must go to Jummah, for example, or go to Majlis. Okay, so we do it, right? But when you love someone, right, you don't have that same calculus in your mind. You're doing it. So there's something in you internally that drives you to do that thing, right? You're not doing it blindly, right? You're doing it without question. You're sacrificing for that person that you love. You're sacrificing for that thing that you love, right? And there's some inner drive that's pulling you towards that thing, right? So we need to build this love, this wilayah towards the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, and that will help make it easier for us to avoid doing the things that they don't want us to do, right? When we love, for example, we don't want to sin, right? Because we have this sense of love towards God, right? But how do we get that love, right? And the prerequisite to love is knowing the object of your love, right? So that means that we need to learn about God. We need to learn about the prophets, and we need to learn about the Ahlul Bayt before we can love them, right? Of course, it sounds nice to say that we should love these people and God, but if we don't really know them, if we don't understand them, we don't understand the concept of God in Islam, if we don't know what the prophets taught, we don't know how they lived, don't know, why Imam Ali was such an amazing person, then it's difficult to love them, right? Once we do learn about these personalities, then their, and their ethics, their scholarship, their contribution to society, then our love will naturally grow, right? So some resources for learning, and I'm going to just throw this up here. These are some books that I recommend, and I can share the slides with anyone who's interested, or you can take a screenshot or whatever you'd like. There's some books that, God's Emissaries, Vision of Islam, A Young Muslim's Guide to the Modern World, Origins and Early Development of Shia Islam, Muhammad by Martin Lings. These are all really good books to become more acquainted with God, the Prophet, the Imams. I should warn you that not all of them are from an explicitly, completely Shi'i view. So, to that extent, if you're not very strong in your Shi'i, ideology, if you don't know it as well, you should probably, read this along with some other material as well, or read it with someone and discuss it with someone who's more knowledgeable than you as well. So if you're concerned about that, right? Websites, islamquest.net, learning the Arabic language, it's very important. If you're in college, I would strongly recommend, if you have the opportunity to learn Arabic in college, definitely take that opportunity. You're not going to get that opportunity once you start working. You'll have to learn it on your own. Definitely, once you learn Arabic, it will open up your understanding of faith more, because inshallah, your understanding of Quran, Hadith, Dua will be stronger, right? And you can not get a perfect understanding of these texts when you read them through the Arabic that you learn in college, but you'll get a much better understanding, right? So definitely beats reading translations, right? So if you can do that, do that. right? Some other ideas to strengthen our wilaya, right? How else can we strengthen this love towards God, the prophets, and the Ahlul Bayt, right? If you have the opportunity in your summers to do Hajj, to do Ziyarah, definitely take that, right? Definitely take that opportunity, because that will increase your love. If you go to visit the Imam or the Prophet and do dua there, send your salams there, etc., pray at their shrines, that's definitely going to increase that love. And you'll see other mu'mineen there too and have increased love towards them as well, right? Other things like attending the majalis of Imam Hussein, spending time with ulama. This is big. If you have ulama in your own community, if you're in DC, you have Sayyid Sulaiman there, you have other ulama who are worth, as they say, they're worth benefiting from. Other mu'mineen, if you can't spend time with scholars. And I want to make a point, especially if they're older than us, right? Often as youth, it's hard to, we kind of think of older people, and our culture encourages us to think of them in a demeaning way sometimes, and that's not right, right? Islamically, we respect our elders. And I was actually reading a hadith today that Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam said that gray hair is actually, when he saw his first gray hairs, he asked God, what is this? And God said, this is dignity, right? And so he said, then his dua was, God, increase me in dignity, right? So like this idea that, we're young and we have nothing to get from elders is really wrong, right? And we need to benefit from our elders who are mu'mineen, who have had more time to do good deeds than us, and who have lived and practiced Islam in this country for many more years than us, right? So if we can benefit from those experiences, that will help us, right? And of course, doing what God and the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt have asked us to do is going to increase that wilaya as well, right? When we act on our faith and we do that amal that we know is correct, then it's going to increase our wilaya as well. One of the most important aspects of wilaya is having a strong support network of Muslim friends. And I'm sure you guys have all heard this before, but I want to reiterate it, especially for the younger people, that once you get into college, less so in high school, but once you get into college, you're going to meet a lot of new people, right? A lot. And Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, al-mar'u ala dini khalileh, falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalilu, right? So a man is on the religion of his friend, right? He follows the religion of his friend. And so one should look to see who he befriends, right? So we're not often intentional about the people we befriend, right? We think of our friends, for example, the people we tend to befriend are people who are of a similar background as us, right? Whether that's ethnically or some other way. They have similar interests, people that, we can laugh with, for example, and we can have a good time with, people we connect with, right? In some way, right? And that's fine. And I'm not criticizing that, but here are some other ideas to think about, right, with our friends, right? So some other thoughts to think about, right? Does this person who I'm friends with, does this person help me remember God in any way, right? Through their words, through their actions. Is there anything about this person that reminds me of the character of the Prophet or the Ahlul Bayt, right? Anything I've read in hadith that I can see this person implementing, whether it's their akhlaq, their behavior towards other people, their piety, their willingness to not do haram behavior, their attachment to the Quran, their praying on time, whatever it is there something about this person that helps me remember God and the hereafter in any way whatsoever? And so just another question to consider about the people that we're friends with now. When I'm with this person, do I grow spiritually? Do I grow intellectually? Or do I stay the same, or do I slide? Right? What effect does this person have on me, right? So, I'm not saying here that, all right, go to Facebook and delete like everybody on your friends list, right? And like start making new friends from today. No, like obviously that's not what I want you to do. And I don't think that's healthy, right? So of course, like you all have your own friends and that's good, and they're probably based on a lot of the things mentioned on the top of the slide. They're similar interests, you laugh together, etc. And that's all good. But as you start being intentional about making your friends, or as you start prioritizing certain friends, maybe this will help you think of who is a good friend Islamically in a certain way, right? Who is it that you grow with, right? Who is it that you're learning from when you talk to them, right? Who is it that you can connect with intellectually and you have a better understanding of Islam through talking to that person, right? Who is it that has an effect on you? When you see that person do good deeds, you're kind of inspired, like they move you in a certain direction. They make you want to do those good deeds as well, right? So those are qualities that, inshallah, they exist in some of the people we're already friends with. And those are the people that are kind of the gems, right? That you want to stick onto, right? Because when we get to these difficult challenges, these are the people that, whose example is going to kind of help us get through the challenges of, this age. So this is the last slide. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I just want you all to know that, this process of high school, this process of college, it's not easy. It's not easy to maintain your identity as a mu'min, to maintain your faith during this process. Many people have struggled. Many people have had doubts. And inshallah, these remarks, these tips were something that just helped a tiny bit, right, in thinking about, how you can approach this, inshallah, going forward. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَمَنْ يَتَّقَ اللَّهَ يَجْعَلْ لَهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. For anyone who has God consciousness and taqwa, God shows him a way out and provides him from sources he could never imagine. And if anyone puts his trust in God, then God is sufficient for him, right? So it's not easy, right? But in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that if you have taqwa, just as we saw in the last verse, if you had God consciousness, if you're sincere, if you trust God, and if you're, doing your best to do what God wants, and, you're trying, even if you may slip sometimes, then God will help you, right? God will show you a way and he'll be with you, right, as you go through this process. So that's it for the formal remarks. We don't have too much time, but I do want to spend some time for open discussion and Q&A. If Sister Hidayah, if you want to take over in terms of moderating that.
Yeah, definitely. So first of all, thank you so much, Sayyid. That was amazing. I know that I learned a lot. Inshallah, all of you guys learned a lot too. Before we jump into that though, I just want to say, make sure you follow Shahina Jeff DC on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Facebook. And actually, this is also a joint program with the AIM Association. So make sure you follow them on Instagram. We don't have Facebook yet. That's coming, inshallah. But yeah, make sure you follow them on Instagram as well, inshallah. So now, if you have any questions, please just put them in the chat. If you can send them to me privately, and I can read them out, or you can put them in the chat, inshallah, and we'll kind of go from there. And also, if you want, if you have any questions that you want to say out loud, I just ask you to, don't talk over each other, because that makes it very hard. But yeah, if you want to take it one at a time, then that totally works too. So, Sayyid, you mentioned earlier, perfecting the script for shaking of the hands. Someone is asking, what is your script for getting out of shaking women's hands?
Yeah, thank you. So that's a great question. Is my voice coming through?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think there's different ways to approach this. What I generally used to say during this time period is basically, I don't, so there's different things, right? It depends on the context. So if you're going, for example, to a job interview, right, it's often helpful to email that person ahead of time, right? Because you're just meeting that person once, right? You can just tell them, just out of modesty and my religious beliefs, I don't have physical contact with the opposite gender other than my own close relatives, right? Basically something as simple as that. right? And I think, you know, when you're talking to people in person, I use a similar script. I say that out of, I'm sorry, out of modesty, I can't, and it's difficult and it's hard, especially if you're meeting people in a group setting, etc. But I think that one thing that's important here also is to try to develop a relationship with those people outside of that first interaction, right? So for example, let's say you don't shake someone's hand, but you need to work with them, right? So later on, you try to do something to kind of spin that relationship and make it more positive. So you talk to them, you make small talk with them. If you can do some other good deed towards them, you do it. And that way, the only memory they have of you isn't that you didn't shake their hand. And in fact, once you do those nicer things, that'll probably open up some space for them to ask you later on, you know, I didn't understand that. Can you explain it to me further, right? So that's yeah, generally that. If anyone has other thoughts on that, they can share that as well if they have a good script.
I normally just say I'm a germaphobe and I don't like to touch people, which is true actually. But yeah, even if you're not, like I said, now Dr. Fauci's kind of saved us a little bit. So you can just be like, hey, don't touch me because Dr. Fauci said so. But okay, so another question is, so we've talked a lot in generalities in terms of, you know, Muslim identities in college spaces, high school, etc. How does this does this differ at all when we're talking specifically about being Shia in these spaces, or does it not? Is it all the same kind of general advice?
Yeah, I think this is, so this presentation was geared towards just being Muslim, right? And the issues that would apply to any Muslim. So this would apply to Shia and Sunni. I think being Shia in college has its own unique challenges, especially in the MSA space. And that's a whole different presentation and different discussion. So if anyone is interested, we can try to do a presentation on that. Or if this was interesting, we can try to do another session or talk, you know, expand it more. Or try to, you know, have some more time for discussion. But yes, I think, you know, being Shia, especially when interacting with Sunni Muslims, I think there's a lot there that is needed to be said in terms of maintaining our identity while still being united with other Muslim groups. And there's different strategies and different ways to approach it for another discussion.
Okay. So that seems to be all I've seen. Does anybody else have any questions, comments that they want to add?
And any comments really too. If it doesn't have to be a question, if you have any thoughts based on your own experience that you'd like to share, that anyone that we can all benefit from, please do share with the rest of the group, because we're all, you know, we're all in this together. We're not, you know, no one has a monopoly here on the right answers, and there's different ways to think about some of these issues.
Yeah, and I know Sayyid Suleiman is here too. So Sayyid, please feel free to jump in at any point with any thoughts or comments as well.
I'll just briefly take a few minutes. Thank you, Jazakumullah. Sayyid, that was an excellent presentation. And of course, Hidayah, you're also one of our scholars and presenters, so share your experiences. Before we proceed, with everyone's permission, you know, this is a night of Qadr, so it's a night of prayer. And I'd like to request everyone to recite a Surah Fatiha for, in particular, the shuhada and martyrs that gave their lives for Islam, ulama who devoted their lives for Islam. Sister Hidayah, I believe your grandmother passed away just a few days ago, right?
Yes, yes.
Mercy on her, grant your family peace.
Thank you.
For all of the marhumeen, for Sister Hidayah's grandmother, for our ulama, shuhada, let's all recite a Surah Fatiha and pray for Allah to honor them in the hereafter with the company of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Maliki Yawmiddin. Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladhina an'amta alayhim. Ghayril maghdubi alayhim waladdallin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And please do share your feedback. You can do it now if you've had a time to think about it with AIM, with Shahi Najaf. This kind of event, it kind of came together as a discussion during the month of Ramadan. And Seichan, in a short notice, I think you did an excellent job. Very, very comprehensive, very to the point. But these are the kinds of things that we should have periodic discussions. So keep your questions coming in, and it's our job to, inshallah, try to bring a place to talk and to give some answers, at the very least, some food for thought for everyone. I think,
There was a comment on the chat. If you want to address that, this brother says that it's not only about. I feel like it's not only about making your love for Allah stronger. I feel like you have to believe that Allah loves you and He cares about you. This way, you will naturally feel closer to Allah. So.
Yeah, it's a very good point. And in fact, that's what our hadith tell us, that if you want to know what Allah thinks of you, then Allah thinks of you exactly what you think of Him. If you want to test how much Allah loves you, then look into your heart and see how much you love Allah. And if you want Allah to love you more, then you should love Allah more. And remember, love is not something that happens to us. People say that, you fall in love, you fall out of love, and love is not something that happens to you. Love is something that we do. What we say, what we think, the thoughts that I entertain in my mind, the actions that I do, the things that I repeat in my imagination and in my life, that creates a love. And you have control over your emotions, not always directly, but we create the environment. And if we create that love and develop that love, then Allah does have a special love for us. And that's a special love that is protection and blessings for believers. In fact, Allah has a general love even for evildoers. Even for people who are sinful and evil, Allah says, I show mercy to them. I even sometimes answer their prayers. I give them their needs and more than their needs in this life. There's a general love because love is the basis of God's creation. But then there's a special love of giving you peace of mind, of giving you blessings, of protecting you from going down the wrong path. And that special love is what we're talking about. When you love Allah, He gives you much more than just the general love of taking care of your material life. And that is based on, do I love the Prophet? Do I love Allah? In kuntum tuhibbun Allah, fattabi'uni. If you love Allah, follow the Prophet, develop that love, and Allah will love you with that special love even more.
So Sayyid, either one of you guys can jump in here, but do you have any sort of practical tips for going from the doom and gloom way that we sort of think about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to a more positive kind of outlook? Because I think for better or worse, when we think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first thing a lot of us think about is like, oh, we're going to hell if we don't do this or that or the other thing. So how do we kind of shift that, because Allah's objective is not to send everybody to hell, contrary to what I think most Maulanas say, and our grandparents say, like, that's not the reason you were created. So how do we shift away from that a little bit more?
Sure, I can start. Then Seichan, if you'd like to add something. The hadith of Imam Ja'far Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam tells us that put more hope in things that you'd never expect than even those things that you might normally expect. Like you normally think that, you save up $1 a day, you're going to get $10 in 10 days. You kind of have a sort of accounting of what normally happens. But remember, Allah has power over all things. Allah works miracles and magic at every moment in life. And in history and today, you can find one person can stand up against an entire army and defeat them. Imam Hussein can defeat the army of Yazid and Ibn Ziyad. And that happened in history, and it happens even today if you just look around. So Imam Ja'far Sadiq says, remember that the queen of Saba, she was not looking for faith. She was just a fair, just ruler. And she met Prophet Sulaiman, became a believer. The Prophet Musa alayhi salam, he went to find fire on a mountain for his family. He came back a prophet of God. the magicians of Fir'aun, they went to defeat the magic of Musa and earn a monetary prize, money from Pharaoh. They came back believers. And that, I think, is a reminder for us. So the stories of how Allah's miraculous help came to the prophet, to the imams, to previous prophets at times of distress, that really is very powerful. And Allah's mercy is bigger than Allah's justice or his punishment. We should always remember that. We should always have fear in our heart because fear keeps us on the right path. But our hope in Allah is infinite because Allah's mercy is infinite.
Yeah, if I can just add briefly, sister. One thing on a practical level that, in addition to what Sayyid Suleiman said, that I think is very useful here, and I think this is just piggybacking on Sayyid's answer, but just to drive it home more, I think if you really study the stories of the prophets and the imams, and study, for example, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala basically talks about their stories and what the challenges were that they went through and how he sort of guides them in the Quran, that might give you a more holistic view of sort of how God works in our lives, right? It's not all doom and gloom. It's God was there every step of the way for some of these people at times that of difficulty and darkness. They relied on God, right? They trusted God. They did things that would be unimaginable for us, sacrificing their own son, trying to sacrifice their own son, for example. And they did this all with a love and a certainty and a faith that I think kind of allows us to understand how our relationship with God should be beyond just the doom and gloom aspect of, do this and don't do this, otherwise you're going to hell. So that's, I think, learning those stories carry a lot of power and weight. And I think they're a big part of the Quran for that reason, perhaps.
Okay, so another question that just popped up here. How do we concentrate in Salah and connect more in our Salah? Any advice?
So shall we go to take that first? Or?
No, why don't you go ahead and say it, please?
Okay, so, think of it like this. Think of it as you have a test in school and you didn't study for the test and you come and you're worried about how you're going to do. So you turn to your friend and say, tell me what I can do to pass this test. At that point, there's nothing you can do. You have to just give the test as you prepared for it. The way to pass the test is to read the textbook, do the homework, pay attention in class, attend class, put your phone away in class, and so on, before, right, from the beginning of the semester. So the way to concentrate in prayer really is not a lot about what you're going to do during prayer. It's what you're going to do before prayer. And if you tell me I'm not very athletic, if you tell me that I have to run, I don't know, a 5K race, I won't be able to do it, especially the morning of the race. But if you tell me a month in advance and you bribe me a little bit, I might be able to prepare. And if I prepare, then I might be able to succeed. I won't, win any medals, but I might be able to complete the race. Same thing with your salat. You have to live your life thankful for everything Allah has given you. Remember that Allah is the source of our life, our blessings. If you live a humble life, a grateful life, if you remember that Allah is always there with you, you turn to Allah and pray to Him whenever you're scared, whenever you're worried, whenever you remember a good thing or a bad thing in your life, then your prayer will naturally be the peak, the connection. But if the rest of my life is about good food, games to play, shows to watch, time to spend, there's nothing you can do during prayer that's going to make it meaningful.
Yeah, I'd like to just very briefly add, say Jazakumullah khair. Just really briefly, I think, and this is very practical advice, but I think important that, if you don't know the meanings of what you're saying, in addition to, I think what Sayyid Suleiman has said is the most important thing, right? You need to be grounded and focused in what you're doing in life. And then prayer is the pinnacle of, the rest of your day, right? Because you're speaking to God. But in addition to that, when you are speaking, if you have some conception of what you're saying, then that's going to allow you to connect better, right? And we talked about if you have the opportunity to study Arabic in college, try to take that opportunity, right? even if you don't do that, if you have access to translations of the surahs you're reading, or the adhkar that you're doing in ruku and sujood, right? As well as what you're some understanding of what those mean, try to get that, right? And try to ponder on that and think about that while you're doing the prayer as well, right? It's not mumbo jumbo, right? There's meaning behind these concepts that you're saying. So if you can learn these meanings and understand them deeply and reflect on them, your prayer will be more powerful because of that.
Yeah. And if I may also, I just want to share something that I learned years ago and just relearned again this Ramadan. And actually somebody else just privately messaged it to me, but it's a saying from Ayatollah Behjat where he says that, like, don't worry about concentration in salah. 100% concentration is just for Amirul Mu'mineen and the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam. Your job is just to worry about praying awwal al-waqt, right? Make sure you pray on time for 40 days, and the spirituality, the sense of connection, that will come. So just make sure you pray on time, and inshallah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of the rest. Yeah, I was just thinking about that, and somebody sent it to me. They said not to mention their name, so I'm not going to. But I think that's also an important, reminder. Just putting too much pressure on yourself to be like, I'm going to pray like Sayyid Zahra can pray, or Imam Ali alayhi salam can pray. Just make sure that you pray on time, and inshallah, the rest will come. So any other last minute questions?
I have a question that was accidentally sent to me privately.
Yeah.
So I'll just read it so the individual doesn't have to resend it again.
Yeah.
Brother, if Allah knows your every move, why does he test us even if he knows what all of our choices will be?
Okay.
So I'll quickly give a brief answer, and then we can add to it. Allah doesn't test us for His sake; He tests us for our sake. I mean, can you imagine if you want to learn a martial art, but you never have a tournament? You want to play soccer, but you never have a practice. Right? Why does your coach give you a practice? Not because they need to figure out whether you've done your work or not, but you need to figure it out. So the test is for us. It's not a test for Allah. And it's through that test that we learn things that we didn't know about ourselves. We discover strength that we didn't know before, and life has meaning. A lot of people who are poor and have a hard life have a more meaningful life than people who are rich. Not always, but a lot of times that's true, because they are living. They have real relationships that they value, people that they care about, they're sacrificing for, and it might not always be easy. And if somebody's oppressing them, that's not a justification, but it does show that through tests, through having meaning in our life, which always brings a test, you get a lot of blessing and a lot of peace of mind. So it's for us, it's for our benefit.
Sean, anything to add?
No, nothing to add there. You see it.
Okay, good. All right. So does anybody else have any last minute questions for either of our respected scholars here tonight?
Or even if anyone wants to share anything that from their college experience or high school experience that they found was difficult, or something they found was helpful that other people can benefit from, that's also useful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely, go ahead.
So I've heard that there's a hadith in which there was a companion of Imam Jafar Sadiq, if I'm not mistaken, in which that companion asked the Imam who was greater in taqwa, Kumail or Abul Fadl Abbas. And the Imam stands up and he says, my uncle Abbas could have turned like 10 people into Kumails or something like that. So my question is, why didn't he? Why didn't he just turn the whole world into Kumails so that we could all grow even further?
that's one of those questions it's really hard to answer because it's about something beyond the human ability to understand. You know, like for example, how would you explain to a child something that they've never experienced? There's a certain age before which you can't really explain death because the child's mind is not ready for it. And so as a human being, God has given us free will. And free will is a beautiful thing, right? None of us wants to be controlled, but it's also a really dangerous thing. Why wouldn't God prevent Yazid from doing what he did? There's no way for us to understand that. All we can do is we can say, we see the beauty of the test that Imam Hussein gave and the inspiration that he gave us. We see the beauty of it. But even if we see the beauty of Karbala, if we had been there and we had been given a choice by God, we would have cut Yazid down before Karbala as a human being. And that's our job, to want that, to try that. But that's why we are servants of God. We're not God. Does that make sense? So what you're asking in effect is, why did God give free will? Why didn't he just allow Imam Hussein or Abul Fadl Abbas or anyone else to stop people's free will and make them good?
But would it still stop their free will if because if they're turned into a Qumaya, for instance, right? They still know what they're doing, all their actions, but they've just reached a stage in taqwa Allah that they don't want to do anything less.
Yeah, that taqwa part though has to come from you. That's the free will part. God can give you the knowledge, he can give you the resources, and he does. But then that taqwa, the desire to want to follow it, submission, can only come from within the heart. And the only way for somebody to be prevented from doing evil is for them to be prevented from having free will. And that's something that Allah says, that we don't have complete free will, but Allah has given us a certain amount of choice. And that amount of choice he's given us in his wisdom. Does that make sense? So, Abul Fadl Abbas and even pious people, they can open doors. They can remove certain obstacles from your heart, but they're never going to be in a position to make you do something, because Allah has deliberately and in his wisdom said, the choice has to come from you. That's why Prophet Nuh's son, that's why Prophet Muhammad's uncle, Abu Lahab, right? These were people who were raised by, imagine, Abdul Muttalib, Abu Talib, these people who were perfect, and yet they were evildoers. So Abdul Muttalib, according to some ahadith, was a hujjah of Allah in his time. Abu Talib was a wasi, just like Imam Ali was a wasi of the Prophet, according to some narrations. Nobody was more powerful spiritually in their time than they were. But free will is something that Allah has given us in his wisdom, and it's really impossible for us to be able to understand why. And we're not supposed to try to understand it. It's not our job.
Ahsan, thank you.
Hey, Sean, do you have anything to add?
I have nothing on that question. Thank you.
And I wanted to say something really, really briefly. I think that, you know, there's something to be said about earning our level of taqwa also, right? Rather than it being given to us. I'm not saying there's anything bad about, you know, Abu Fadl Abbas blessing somebody with that, right? But it means more to get to heaven when you've actually earned it, right? So yeah, I've heard this question asked many times, and that's something that, you know, came to my mind also. Rather than it being given to you, the striving of it not only makes Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala happy with you, but even within yourself, you know, it means more to have earned it. Okay, so any other questions before we end, inshallah?
I had a quick question, but we're over time, so I don't know. Is it okay if I ask it quickly?
Yeah, quickly. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So as a college student, should we attempt to schedule our courses in periods outside of Salah time, or we should prioritize our classes and our class times? And then following up with that, if our professors, let's say, unintentionally insult Islam or spread misinformation, do we have like a duty or an obligation to like call them out in class, or can we like after class, speak to them on the side? Thank you.
Sachan, would you like to answer that?
Said, if you could go ahead, please. Thank you.
Sure. So in general, you have a duty to respond if you have the knowledge. Sometimes your professor might say something and you know it's wrong, but you don't quite have enough information to exactly respond to it. In that case, you don't have a duty to correct them at that moment. You might have a duty to go and learn, so in the future you'll be able to respond. And also, if your second condition is if you can respond and have a positive effect. So if the people are not ready to listen, if the professor is probably not going to respond well at that moment, then you don't have a responsibility to speak up at that moment. You can address it privately with the professor. You can do so maybe even with some of your classmates later on. But if you know what is right, and if you can convey the message effectively in a way that's not going to backfire, then you do have a duty to try to stand up for what is right. And don't worry about proving your point. Right? The truth is the truth. You don't need to bribe somebody to accept it. You don't need to get angry at somebody if they don't want to accept it. Whoever accepts the truth, it's to their benefit. Whoever doesn't accept it, it's their loss. So don't worry about the response. Don't worry about getting into a back and forth and get drawn into a useless discussion. If those two conditions are met, you know what's right, you can say it effectively, do your part, and then if people want to drag you into a back and forth, then let it go. And as the Quran says, that's if you are guided, if you're guided, it's to your own benefit. And if you are misguided, it's your own loss. It's not God's loss. It's not the Prophet's loss. Ahsantum to everyone. Thank you, Sister Hidayah. Thank you, Sayyid Shan. And we hope that we'll have more sessions like this.
Yeah, inshallah. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I know, again, like I said, it's early or late, depending on your perspective. But I really appreciate everyone joining us. And inshallah, you benefited from what was said here tonight. And, inshallah, to keep you updated on future programming, like I said, make sure that you follow Shahi Najaf and AIM Association on their respective social media. I believe Shahi Najaf is at Shahi Najaf DC, right, on Instagram. And AIM is at AIM Association, AIM with an E, AIME Association on Instagram as well. So thank you so much. And inshallah, we'll see you during another one of these very soon.
I see there's one more question in the chat. Do we have it? Are we like completely ending it, or do we have any spare time?
Well, we're 20 minutes over.
Okay, my bad, my song.
We want to give some time to. Are you talking about the question about if we're on the wrong path?
Yes.
Should we? Do you want to close out with that, Seichan?
So I'm not sure if I understand that this one, if I'm pursuing something that Allah does not want from me.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think, how do you come to realize? I think the question is, how do you figure out that you're on the wrong path? If I understood it rightly, how do you come to realize that so you can stop?
Okay.
So one thing that's useful is that if it's not always easy for us to see. If you want to learn how to give a speech, talk to a mirror, or even better, talk to a friend who's not embarrassed to tell you that you're stuttering, or like right now I'm looking at my laptop but not at the camera, right? So I need somebody to tell me, Sayyid, I know it's late, but you need to look at the camera so people don't feel like you're distracted. So things like that. If you have somebody else telling you, and don't be afraid to accept that advice and criticism, it really helps. Now, thinking about our own day, we can see a lot of our mistakes that we wouldn't see if we're just distracted. So istighfar, reflection and thinking help, but it really helps find good friends and be open to suggestions, ask for advice, and you'll learn a lot of things that it's difficult for people to see in themselves. Sechan made that point also, that one of the benefits of having people who are good, pious people who are older than you is they've probably been through life, and a lot of the challenges that you're going through now, maybe slightly different because times change, but a lot of the things people go through are not entirely different. So you can get some good experience even in advance. Imam Ali mentions that I learned from people by studying their experiences as Allah taught in the Quran and elsewhere. So I think we only have about an hour and a half or so, maybe a little bit more than that until Fajr time. These are the last moments of Laylatul Qadr. I hope everybody is charged now, and spiritually you have your energy drink. Thanks to Sechan and Sister Hidayah and all of you. And inshallah, we'll benefit from the last few moments of the most powerful night of the year.
Yes, please, inshallah, pray for each other as well, and for our ulama especially, who have sacrificed time, energy, and I'm sure like blood, sweat, and tears throughout this entire Ramadan. I know that Sayyid's been doing like 3 or 4 things in a day. So yeah, please keep him and his family and Sayyid Shan and all of our scholars in your du'as, inshallah, so that they can continue to bless us with the knowledge, inshallah. And again, we'll see you back here hopefully soon for another one of these sessions, inshallah. So, Assalamu alaikum, everybody.
Wa alaikum salam.
Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much.
Assalamu alaikum.